Welcome into episode 309 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Game 5 at the TD Garden last night, Bruins with a chance to end the series versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. They lose in overtime 2-1. Series is now 3-2 in favor of Boston still. But Bridget, Scott, let's waste no time, get right into the opening shifts, and break down this absolute missed opportunity by the Bruins.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's hard not to feel like, oh boy, here we go again. And we're going to get into a lot of things that they apparently didn't learn from last year or couldn't fix this time around. I know Bridget is going to touch on lineup changes, or at least one in particular. I want to start with, while it's going to absolutely be fair to question Montgomery's lineup changes, I want to make sure no one is letting the Bruins' top players off the hook, because outside of Jeremy Swayman, I don't really think any of them showed up in this game. David Pastrnak had some rough turnovers, played over 18 minutes at 5-on-5. You guys want to guess how many high danger chances the Bruins had in those 18 and a half minutes?
Zero.
Not a single one. Brad Marchand obviously has had an incredible series. 0 shots on goal from him. Pavel Zacha, 1 shot attempt, lost 13 of his 17 faceoffs. Charlie Coyle, maybe a little better, but him and Charlie McAvoy together completely lose Matthew Knies on the overtime winner. They're both standing there. Neither one can get the rebound. Neither one can get Knies. Grizzly got overpowered by Tavares on the rush too, so throw all 3 of them under the bus on that. Jake DeBrusk, 1 shot attempt. Obviously, he's had a good series, but not last night. Thought Hampus Lindholm was pretty rough on a couple breakouts. There was one late in regulation where he had the puck in the corner, had time, and threw it into 3 bodies for some reason instead of like literally anything else. Just again, there's a lot to question here, and there's a lot to get in with the lineup. But ultimately, I don't really think the lineup matters when your top players, quite frankly, just borderline no-show in a closeout game.
Yeah, and you want to know what annoys me about the overtime goal and Grizzlies play in that shift? Tavares should not be faster than Matt Grzelcyk, right? So what happens is Tavares is coming at him, and he can't catch him. Like he's backing up. He tries to turn, and at that point, Tavares loses him. And I know Tavares was a very fast player when he was younger. He's a little slower now. I don't know. Matt Grzelcyk, one of his strengths is his speed. We know it's not his size. He still has a decent amount of speed. He goes to the outside. Tavares goes to the outside, and Grzelcyk can't keep up with him. And he gets a shot off. He throws it off the side of the net, and then gets it back behind the goal. And we know what happens after that. Puck comes very quick out to Matthew Knies. Swayman had no chance. Swayman. It was not Swayman's fault for either of those goals. Completely screened on the first one. Second one happened way too fast for him to be able to recover for that. So, definitely not on him. And my opening shift is that I don't know why Grzelcyk was back in. I don't. And you immediately saw that it was not a great idea. He started shaky, nervous maybe. First few shifts, he was pretty bad. A lot of turnovers. Same thing as earlier in the series. He's getting bumped off of pucks. He's struggling transitioning. And I'm thinking to myself, at the very least, Shattenkirk gives you a better chance to score when it's tied, right? Like at the very least, he brings that, where I didn't feel like Grzelcyk was going to put a puck in or throw a nice assist. I feel like Shattenkirk, the upside is still higher. I feel like even though he at times is slower, there's more there for the Bruins to work around. And it makes me question maybe we see Forbort, because he has been practicing. He didn't take warm-ups before Game 5. But if you're looking for, someone to shut down defenseman, and you think that's what you were missing in Game 5, maybe we do see him.
So so much to break down. The entire team was lifeless, and except for Jeremy Swayman. That said, so I'm not going to pick necessarily on Matt Grzelcyk, but it's not a good look when in back-to-back years you're up 3-1 in overtime on home ice, and he's a focal point of the game-winning play for the other team. Again, I'm not trying to oversimplify that. It's just a fact. He's involved on both goals. I think the obvious wish there, because he did keep Tavares to the outside, I think the obvious wish was to maybe force him around the net. But I'll
that's
digress.
The thing. At the very last second, Tavares gets to cut it. He cuts in. He beats him there.
But I really do feel, because Grzelcyk deserves blame on that play, as does McAvoy, as does Coyle. But that's one play, and it's a game-deciding play. But the entire team was awful. And so that leads me into my opening shift. And I guess I'll just read what I tweeted out last night, or what's the term now, guys? What I X'd out last night? I don't really know. But anyway, so I kind of let the smoke settle, the dust settle a little bit. And I just wanted to put this one statement out there because there was a lot of takeaways from last night. But basically I said, one would think that after how things ended last year, snowballing from a Game 5 loss at home in overtime, that efforts, in all caps, wouldn't be a question in Game 5 this year. Losses happen, but it can be stomached if the effort is there. It wasn't. Lesson apparently not learned. Buckle up, could be a bumpy ride. I mean, for all things to be the issue last night, after what happened last year, effort, 2 shots on goal in the first, 25 minutes of that hockey game? That was probably, and I was at the game last night. I think it was the second game I went to all year. So maybe in person it's more magnified and you guys are there all the time. But that had to have been one of the sloppiest, poorly played, executed games by the Bruins I've seen in quite some time. Oh, by the way, Austin Matthews is out of the lineup last night. So you fall into this trap of, oh, we have extra lives to spare here. Toronto doesn't. They're playing more desperate. What the fuck did you guys learn last year? If you lose Game 5 because you're throwing it all out there and you just do everything but win for one reason or another, fine. But to no-show a hockey game after last year's debacle, now a couple of things are at play. The whole hockey world goes from making fun of the Maple Leafs and their bench drama and how they're choke artists and they can never get the job done, to, oh no, the Bruins, are they going to give up back-to-back 3-1 series leads in 2 years? Now the pressure goes strictly to Boston. Toronto's city they're feeling better because they already thought their season was done. Now it's just, it's whatever. It's I don't know what the phrase is, but they're feeling a little bit better about the situation. And last but not least, the Panthers took care of the Lightning in Game 5. So now, even if you do travel back to Toronto and win Game 6, or go back to Boston and win Game 7, which is a big if now you just lost the whole advantage, or at least even par with Florida in the war of attrition. So the entire night, again, if you lose, it's one thing. To lose based on zero effort and zero execution, in my opinion, guys, is unforgivable.
Yeah, and Jim Montgomery even highlighted that after the game. He said there's 3 E's that he evaluates: execution, effort, emotion. He said our execution was off, and I think our effort didn't match theirs. Now, he did think the emotion was there. I might push back on that as well, but he thought his team had emotion, but he did call them out as not having effort. And that's, coaches don't want to say that about their players. Like, usually that's kind of a last straw to say, your team's effort wasn't there. So for even him to admit that after, like, tells you just how poor it was. And yeah, it's baffling because it's like right after Saturday night's game, Montgomery says, we'll see how much we learned because we'll be able to tell by our start. Sunday, he talks about the importance of a fast start. Monday, they start practice slow, which in and of itself is inexcusable. Montgomery has to stop practice like literally 3 minutes in, like 2 drills in, and tell his team to pick up the pace. At one point, he yells out, your off day was yesterday, not today. Like, what is wrong with this team? And then even after that, because apparently they felt the rest of the practice went well after that, and then you still start that poorly. And by the way, I didn't even think, like, people are going to give the Leafs a lot of credit for starting fast. Okay, but like, I didn't think the Leafs came out like gangbusters. Like, I didn't think that was an amazing start from them. Even with all that possession and chances, like, they weren't actually getting a ton of great looks. You know, it's not like Swayman had to make like a bajillion great saves to keep the Bruins in it early. You know, maybe one or two, but a lot of it was from the outside, which makes me feel like if the Bruins' effort was just there, if they were just able to execute, if they weren't, they looked so nervous and anxious at times. Like, just the plays they were making with the puck. It's like, I actually think that Leafs team was there for the beating if you just did your job, and they didn't. And to me, it was almost like what they were doing is what gave the Leafs momentum. Like, I didn't really think the Leafs did a whole lot to earn that momentum, honestly.
Scott, it's exactly right. I that's the thing. Toronto didn't play that great. It's just that the Bruins had 2 shots in a period and a half, and
it was still tied.
And it was still tied. It was still. If I had to rank in order of who wanted that series to extend last night, it would go Boston, the refs, Toronto. I think Toronto was 3 of 3 that wanted that series to extend last night. They were just like, all right, if you're going to give it to us, we'll extend it. If you guys really want, like, let us off the hook, sure. I mean, the refereeing was not great, but the Bruins deserve to lose that game 1,000 times out of 1,000. 1,000 times out of 1,000. I will never look at the refs in that game and blame them, and that's all on Boston. Absolutely.
It was so. What I don't understand is how is it that in game 1 and game 3 and 4 we see this team that can transition. I know that they have struggled at times in every game in transition, but this was bad. Like, this was getting pucks out of your own end, turnovers at both blue lines. Puck just seeming like it's bouncing all over the place, and no one can seem to control it. And it just kind of felt like one weird bounce like was going to end up in the Bruins net at some point after it was already tied 1-1. And truthfully, the Bruins goal that they did have was a little bit fluky. It hits Maroon's skates and comes to Frederick. Like, it wasn't like a great pass. It wasn't like it developed on the rush or anything. Like, it was a pass that was supposed to leave the zone that hits Maroon and comes right to Frederick. Now he buries it, which is good for him. But that could have been a 1-0 win for Toronto if that bounce doesn't weirdly end up over there. And it was discouraging to see Pastrnak look like that. Not just him, obviously, but I don't know. That was one of the worst games I've seen him play. And it's hard to explain why that might be, because I do think he was playing with emotion, but he's usually more the execution guy. Like, he's one of the guys that you rely on and count on to make those passes and you know, get shots on goal. And he was having trouble. I don't really know how to explain it. It looked like he wasn't skating as well as normal. He wasn't handling the puck as well as normal. And I just don't know why. That's the thing that I got from the press conference after the game from Jim Montgomery was like, kind of a little bit of confusion. Like, what the hell did I just watch? Like, I don't have any way to explain why this is the way that they played tonight. And people kept kind of pushing him when he said, you know, the effort and the execution wasn't there. And people were like, well, why is that? What did you like break down from that? And he was just like, I don't know. Like, it just seemed like more like he needed to look into it further, because it didn't make sense to him or to fans, I don't think.
Let's call it for what it is, guys. The Bruins are like a fart. You can never trust them. You cannot trust this Bruins team at all.
Wait. Yeah. You can't trust a fart? Like,
I don't think so, no. That's the golden rule, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure you can't trust a fart in public because you might shit yourself. You never know. That's what they say. I'm not speaking from experience. That's what they say.
Okay, all right. Just making sure.
You guys are on the 9th floor. That's what they're saying down in the bowls in the balcony.
Okay, all right. We might use it a little bit more high class analogy. I don't know.
But in all seriousness, like again, so this series so far, as the higher seed, the Bruins yet again have a losing record at home in the series. This is a trend dating back to the St. Louis Blues series. It's an absolute trend. I mean, hell, you could date back probably a ways. I mean, 2017, I think they lost all 3 games in Boston to Ottawa. They also lost games to Tampa Bay in 2018. And then obviously 2019, they go on the cup run, but you lose 3 out of 4 at home to St. Louis, right? And then as the years go along, you lose 1 out of 2 to the Islanders at home, because that was the first time they were back at the Garden for playoff hockey with COVID and stuff. You lose 1 out of 3 to the Panthers last year. In the middle of that, they were 3-0 against Carolina, but they lost every road game of that series, and they were the lower seed. And then this year, you're 1-2 against the Maple Leafs at home as the higher seed. So it's just like they go on the road, they play structured, they play aggressive, and then you come home and get the yips. And that to me is a sign of a team that can't be trusted.
Yeah, the last 2, like, just to keep it to, this kind of main group, last 2 years they're 2-5 on home ice in the playoffs. That they won game 1 both series and have lost every other game. So I don't know how you explain that. Like, now, like the year before, I think that they won all 3 at home against Carolina, right? That
Yes,
the home team won every game of that series. But yeah, these last 2 years especially, and again, just for it to be so similar to last year, like they ended up with, in that game against Florida last year, that game 5, they came back a couple times. They ended up with like over 40 shots on goal, but obviously losing overtime. And the start was similar. They got off to a slow start in that game, fell behind early. I think that was like 5-6 minutes in, and never led. And now again, a year later, game 5 on home ice, you never lead. Slow start, fall behind early. Okay, you come back to tie it, but never get that next goal, never make enough of a push. I thought there were stretches, maybe in the second period, early third, where they looked like the better team, but it was never overwhelming. It was like, okay, they might be slightly better. They're at least playing better than they were to start the game, but there was never really that big push. And again, honestly, like, from either team, like, I didn't think Toronto really had that either, which is what makes it all the more frustrating, is that, it's not like you ran into a team that was just playing incredible hockey and it's like, well, hey, there's the one great game with their back up against the wall. Again, you mentioned it, but like, can't be overstated. They didn't have Austin Matthews. They didn't have their best player. And yet that top line, with now Max Domi playing center between Bertuzzi and Marner, like, was the best line on the ice, like, by a pretty wide margin, I think, for either team. And I don't know. It's just so bad. Like, it's so baffling how even, getting to the first intermission 1-1, it's like that should have been an opportunity to reset and be like, all right, guys, listen, we can't really play any worse than that, and it's still a tie game. Like, okay, here we go. And they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, Max Domi had a great game. I would say he might have been the best player in that game. He won 86% of his faceoffs. He took 14, he won 12. Like, that's crazy. He was killing it in that, and he dominated Zacha. Zacha had a rough game at the faceoff dot. Montgomery changed his lines all around throughout the game. It was, I want to say, probably in this series the most shuffling he did mid-game that he has, just to try to get something going. And it was obviously not successful, because he was doing that in the second and third periods when the game was tied, and obviously didn't score after that point. So,
sorry, but part of the reason he had to do that is because one of the lineup changes he made, clearly going into the game, one of the personnel changes he made, clearly wasn't working. Like, he pretty quickly realized you can't have Maroon and Brazeau on the ice at the same time. That's just too slow of a line, and they couldn't keep up with Boquist. So, like, you almost immediately had to do something about that, and it's like, yeah, that was always going to be concerned.
And Weatherspoon was supposed to be with Lori, and they end up supposed to be with Grzelcyk, and then he ended up having to put Grzelcyk back with McAvoy and put Lori with Weatherspoon, and it ends up limiting Lori's chances to go out there with McAvoy, and it just felt like there was a cascade. Everything had to look different on your D, and it ends up with Carlo at almost 30 minutes, but it was a weird situation on defense. And I think that if you had just kept Lori with McAvoy and Shattenkirk with Weatherspoon, you don't see that much change throughout the game with the D pairs. And then you mentioned this before the game.
Carlo was 21, by the way.
Oh, 21. I thought it said 29.
No. But
it did last night. I'm guessing they updated it.
Yeah, like wrong. It's insane though that Grzelcyk goes from healthy, like it's the roster decision itself is one thing. Like if you're putting Grzelcyk into the Shattenkirk role because you think, okay, he's going to bring more to a third pairing. Shattenkirk, by the way, hadn't been very good 5-on-5. Like taking him out, I don't hate, but he puts Grzelcyk in and he goes from healthy scratch to over 19 minutes on the top pairing. And Lori goes from a bigger role down to 16. And Weatherspoon goes from 18, 19 minutes down to 14. And it's like, why did that happen? Why did that have to happen? Like, it's one thing if you put Grzelcyk in. It's one thing if you put Grzelcyk in and play him 13, 14 minutes. But it's like, why did he end up back in the top pairing? And Weatherspoon and Lori, who are playing well, get shuffled down and have their minutes cut.
Because they didn't know how to match Weatherspoon with either of those guys. I don't think they were happy with what Weatherspoon looked like next to Grzelcyk or Lori. So they ended up just kind of shortening his ice time. And I don't think they should have done that because I don't think he was bad in any of the games he's played. And he is one of your shutdown guys. And it caused issues with how he had to maneuver the lineup throughout the game. Do you think that Brazeau should have been in, or do you think that maybe get him a little bit more rest, or there wasn't necessarily a perfect spot to slot him in? Because you mentioned before the game, Scott, about Beecher actually having the most high danger chances of anyone in the series at 5-on-5, and we talked about him having a rougher game 4, but like at faceoffs and whatnot. But do you think he could have brought more to that game than Brazeau did?
I'll let Brian go first since a lot to get to here.
Your mic's
Brian,
off.
You're muted.
Podcast before Brian. So I just feel like obviously the whole team sucked, as we've stated. I don't think Brazeau was any worse really than any of the other players out there. That said,
I don't either, but it's just, was there a right spot to put him in?
No, yeah, the right spot would have been the 9th floor because as we've talked about before Game 5, and this kind of leads into your opening shift in mine, which is learning lessons and then the lineup changes. Like, not only did the Bruins players not learn a lesson last night, and I'm glad Montgomery questioned their effort in their execution, but he also needs to be questioned because he should have learned lessons from last year too, not to mess with what's working. Like, stop overthinking lineup decisions when the team is coming off of victories. How many times are we going to talk about this with this guy? Like, you just went up 3-1. So in Game 5, you're moving around Weatherspoon and Grzelcyk because you don't like how they look with each other. And it shouldn't even have been a decision to make. Like, again, if you aren't the biggest Kevin Shattenkirk fan, fine. He's part of a team that gave you a 3-1 series lead. So leave it alone, and that stems to the forwards too. You take out Johnny Beecher, who, sure, Game 3, not the greatest, or Game 4, not the greatest in the faceoff circle. Well, in Game 5, the Bruins lost the faceoff battle 32-21. Every single faceoff, it seemed like, Toronto was winning and gaining possession, especially in Bruins ozone faceoffs. It's Is Johnny Beecher getting a ton of offensive zone faceoffs anyway? Probably not. He's probably getting more of the defensive faceoffs when they can design it that way. But long story short, I didn't think Brazeau was bad. I just think he shouldn't have been in there. Don't mess with what worked to get you to that point. The players didn't learn their lessons from last year, and neither did Jim Montgomery. So that sentiment goes to everybody, I think.
Yeah, Brazeau actually created a couple good scoring. He set up Van Riemsdyk twice. He sent Geeky in alone. So, like, yeah, I don't really have an issue with the way Brazeau played.
Mm-mm.
But again, and I will say, like, I thought Beecher's play had not taken, like, a huge step back, but had gone, like, a little worse as the series went on. And I did think he had kind of a rough game.
He started out with the very first goal of the series, so he came out hot in that first
one. And if he kept playing the way he played in game one, he wouldn't have been out of the lineup. So, like, you do have to, there's some accountability there as well. But I'm with Brian, though, when, like, I just think it's kind of bad juju to change a lineup that just won 2 games on the road in the playoffs. Last year was one thing because, listen, Patrice Bergeron gets cleared to play in game 5. And you can't, I know everyone's like, I know there's people who are like, oh, they should have held him. Like Adam Jones says that. I'm sorry, you're not holding Patrice Bergeron out if the doctors clear him to play. You're just not. So last year is understandable. This year it's like, did you really have to change it to get Brazeau and Grzelcyk in? Like, come on. I mean, they're not Patrice Bergeron. Like, what are we doing? You don't have to force that. And yeah, Beecher has been their best faceoff guy this series. And you sucked on faceoffs in game 5. Shattenkirk, listen, so Shattenkirk had been on the ice for 4 of the 7 goals they had allowed in the first 4 games. But a couple of those came in Toronto when he got stuck out against Tavares and Marner in particular. And it's like, you know what you can do on home ice? You can better shelter him. Like, you can keep him away from Marner. So I really, like, I just don't think you had to do that. And especially not if it meant Grzelcyk was going to come in on a top pairing role again and play 19 minutes.
Right.
I just don't.
Right.
It's too much. It's too dramatic of a change from a team that just went up 3-1 and convincingly won 2 games on the road.
Do you think we see Forbort?
I don't think you see Grzelcyk.
I think Grzelcyk's back out.
You might go back to the game 3-4 lineup, especially now that you're back in Toronto. I don't know. I mean, and again, Shattenkirk being in the lineup is primarily because they split up those 2 power play units. And look, last night you got 1 power play.
Yeah.
So the whistle's not been great for the Bruins in this series, and you could also argue
freaking trucked Marchand.
I know. Now you can argue the Bruins aren't earning their power play opportunities, but look, I don't think the refs are out there actively trying to extend the series. But I will say this: who was the sweep? So the Rangers, you got 8 first-round series. The Rangers sweep the Capitals. That series done. 6 of the 7 remaining playoff series heading into last night were at 3-1. So all I'm saying is, if the series if some of these series could extend a little bit, I don't think the league would be upset. And that doesn't mean the refs are out there actively pulling for the Leafs and trying to have the Leafs win. But I think it's going to take something egregious for the refs to call something, maybe both ways. I mean, the Bruins had 3 penalties, so it's not like they had a ton. But I'm just saying, yeah, that wasn't helping things either. But the Bruins, you have to earn your breaks, and the Bruins didn't deserve anything last night.
Well, the one that was most questionable last night for me was when they didn't call matching penalties in that scrum. They called the Bruins for 2 and
Right.
Toronto for only 1, and they could have easily. And I thought they even got the wrong guys. Like, I was like, what was that the worst of what was going on the ice, or
right? Like
other people.
Morgan Riley threw 2 jabs. He's not in the box. Pasternak threw a jab. He's not in. Like,
yep.
They totally guessed on that one, which is
it's
infuriating because it's like, if you don't actually know what happened or you can't figure it out, just call matching. Like, just 2 guys from each team, off you go. And like, no one's really going to complain about that. Like you might rewind and be like, oh, you missed this guy, but like whatever, it's matching. For that to end up a power play either way was like, what are you looking at? Like, how do you come away from that with that? Again, not the reason the Bruins lost. Like very, very far down the list, but
right. And also, like, everybody's up in arms in the arena and online about Marchand not getting drawing a penalty in the third period there. I'm trying to think, what's his name? Holmberg. So Holmberg probably he probably could have got away with a bit of a hold off the faceoff, and but you know they as soon as somebody in the playoffs feels somebody doing something, they go down to try to draw it. I do think like there was something going on with the sticks being tangled up. Maybe there was a holding there, but as the play goes along, Marchand got away with a kind of a cross check to his face, and then Holmberg kind of holds him again, and then Marchand drops like he's taking a back body drop in WWF. So he did embellish that. It's just look, the refs are gonna they don't want to be embarrassed. So I think they missed a call earlier on in the play, but then I just think that play was just kind of a shit show all around.
Yeah, and then they end up tackling each other at the face-off circle to start that, and then following each other around the ice.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what bothers me is where it ends up. Yeah, of course you're calling both, but you miss a clear hold by Holmberg, right? Right off the start. I mean, he has Marchand in an armbar down on the ice and not letting him up, and it's
it almost felt so Marchand won that face-off because Coyle got kicked. And that was questionable in and of itself. But Marchand comes in, wins it clean. I almost felt like Holmberg was not even focusing on the puck. He just wanted to take down Marchand.
Yeah, I mean, again, we won't sit here on this podcast and blame the officiating like another team's coverage in the series. But, there's moments where it's like, all right, really kind of what are we doing here? I mean, how many power plays did the Bruins have in the last 3 games combined? 4. I mean, full 2-minute power plays, not 4-on-4 shit or Maple Leafs had a power play, then they take a hold. I think it's been 4 clean 2-minute power plays for the Bruins in the last 3 games, something like that. But in any event, so the lineup changes. Great take, Bridget. It's Monty not learning his lessons. It's the word I can think of is unnecessary. My opening shift, not learning lessons, that extends to the players and the coaching staff. To Scott's opening shift now, because if Scott's opening shift isn't true, which is the stars, the top players not showing up, my opening shift probably goes away, and your opening shift, Bridget, shouldn't really matter. And I feel David Pastrnak, I think he had 4 shots on goal, but he wasn't dangerous. He wasn't dangerous at all. And people mentioned he blocked a few shots. Great. He also blocked a shot because he just gave the puck away again at the blue line, the defensive blue line for the Bruins. And then he, out of desperation and guilt, blocked a shot. And it's what if you break your ankle on that block shot because you can't manage the puck? Seriously, manage the goddamn puck. And
it looked like he was hurt. It did look like at first. I was there we go.
He's hobbling around during the next commercial break. He's, flexing his leg. It's there's no need for that if you just manage the puck. And I am not the individual that will sit here and point at David Pastrnak's turnover numbers, because we all know when the best players have the puck on their stick, they're going to turn the puck over more than everybody else. And he also is a 60-goal scorer in this league and 45% of the team's offense. So I'm not going to go down that road. That's not my angle here. But as far as your point, Bridget, with why he's looking slow, man, when he goes up against defensemen that lean on him and play him hard, and I know he's an over a point per game guy in the playoffs, and I also beat that drum to people who say he's not a playoff performer. It's bullshit. But he does seem to be less effective when large defensemen play him tough and lean on him. And I'm thinking Joel Edmondson, I'm thinking Jake McCabe, Simone Benoit, who I don't think is very good, but when you up the battle factor on Pastrnak, you do negate him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he should be able to torch those guys. That line should be able to torch those guys. But the problem is they're spending too much time in their own zone defending. They can't get the puck out. Them combined with the defense from the 5-man unit. So you would think that's a line that should be able to get the Leafs in transition a couple times. But by the time they're getting out in transition, they've already spent 30 seconds working in the defensive zone and they don't have the energy. And like, that's usually not really a cycle line. Like you would like for them to get more zone time, more cycling, whatever, but you could live without that as long as they're getting transition chances. And they're not getting those because I think they're just getting pinned in their own zone too much. And we saw, again, as part of the mid-game changes, you see DeBrusk dropped off that line. Heinen moved back. We know that was a really good line down the stretch in the regular season for the Bruins. Heinen with Zacha and Pasternak wasn't a good line early in the series. But then, putting DeBrusk there, that didn't really get that line going either. And it comes back to me like, it's not really going to matter who the left wing is there if Pasternak and Zacha just aren't on top of their games. And at 5-on-5, I really don't think either of them, and certainly not as a duo, they haven't gotten there really all series. Like, a shift here and there, right? Like Zacha has that one great assist to Pasternak off a face-off. A little bit on the power play. Pasternak's been on there for a few of the Bruins power play goals and involved in those, even if he didn't have a point on a couple of them. But overall, no, like they're not doing enough. And now you're at the point, it's one thing when you're up 3-1, you can kind of overlook it and be like, hey, whatever. It's a team sport. Other guys are stepping up, who cares? But now you're kind of at a point like when you're, now the pressure's on you. You let game 5 slip away where it's like, all right, you look to those guys to do more in game 6. Like now you need it. Now it's, you can't just count on Marchand taking over again. Like that line needs to get going. Pasternak needs to get going.
So, and what drives me crazy is that we saw that one good assist from Zacha, but both of Pasta's 2 goals came on plays that were really quick, like one off, like he finishes it, which is, that's good. But it happened so fast. It wasn't like they've been dominating the series. So you see the 2 goals and 4 points for Pasta, but it just doesn't feel like he's been playing the same way. And Zacha doesn't have a goal yet. And when you look at guys that do, it's like, okay, guys who haven't even played the full 5 games. Van Riemsdyk scored. Beecher scored. Carlo has a goal. Geeky has a goal. Frederick has 3 goals. And it's like, and Zacha has none. It just feels like you could call him your top line center. He should have a goal. Like he should be affecting the offense more.
Not only does Pavel Zacha not have a goal in this series, he still does not have a playoff goal in his entire career. 17 playoff games, 0 goals for Pavel Zacha.
That's not good.
I was going to say he didn't really light up the score sheet last year either. And maybe it's one of those situations where certain guys might go through a slump in round 1, but then round 2 they get going. But you got to get there. Because if you don't, then you don't get the chance to fight your way out of a scoring slump you do in the regular season where you're guaranteed 82 games. So I know that's stating the obvious, but yeah, again, Bridget, to your point, both of Pasternak's goals, quick strike offense, and let's be honest, both those goals, to take nothing away from the Bruins on those plays, self-inflicted by the Maple Leafs. I mean, to give up a goal, on a face-off with 7 seconds left in the period, that can't happen. And then the goal in Toronto, again, like any team that has decent defense isn't committing those errors, those blunders. But top players extends to defensemen as well. Charlie McAvoy, pretty much invisible last night, and that's just Hampus Lindholm, another one, right? We got a comment on the last episode that Hampus Lindholm wasn't getting much love for his play as of late. And look, I think Lindholm he played well in Toronto. I mean, I don't think he was like lighting the world on fire, but he was steady, definitely a net positive player. The assist to the Pasternak goal I just kind of mentioned, where he ups it to Zacha. Actually, I don't think Lindholm got an assist in that play because Zacha tipped it, Marchand took it, but starts the play. That's all well and good. But to Scott's point earlier, last night, he's looking like he did at times last year when he was after the series. You find out he was battling an ankle or a foot injury. Last night, it's Scott, you mentioned it, but he gets into his own zone, and you can't lose when you're Hampus Lindholm, when you're 6'4", 6'5", whatever the hell you are. You cannot lose one-on-one puck battles to guys on Toronto who are up to your neck on skates. It can't happen. And he gets beneath his goal line, and I don't care if the TD Garden ice is like a Rhode Island slushy. What are those Dells? Yeah, I don't care if that's a TD Garden ice. Toronto's playing on the same ice. Lindholm falls on himself all the time. It's like, buddy, you're supposed to be a strong skater. Why are you like toe picking constantly behind your net? So McAvoy, Lindholm also have to be better. Top stars aren't just the forwards, right? It's just all the way around. Did not lead last night. It's like when they kept looking to make passes, guys. It's like if there's a pass not there, if a team's clogging up the neutral zone or something, or take the ice they're giving you, skate the puck.
And you know who did that? Lohrei.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
He did. And again, partly it's like maybe you don't trust him in big moments on a top pair, but yet we trust the guy you scratched 2 games in a row, 3 games in a row.
He shielded the puck. There was one play where he took the puck the length of the ice. He took it from the D zone, neutral zone, O zone, shielded it really well, just skated it right into the offensive zone, gained the blue line, and started the play from there. So, like, watching him use his body and be strong on his skates and shield the puck the way he did on that shift I was like, that's great. That's a great beginning of offense that starts from a good transition from your rookie defenseman. And I want to say that I don't think Lindholm has been bad overall in the series. I think everybody was bad last night. Or most everybody was bad last night, not including Swayman. And I thought Carlo played well. I thought Carlos sometimes looked like he was the only defenseman out on the ice at different times, but
yeah, he played well. He was good. He was okay last night.
And also this comes back to something that Brian, you were on top of for a while, and other people noticed it too. McAvoy seems to really hold up his end of the bargain more when he's not with Grzelcyk, like when he's not 100% comfortable, when he's there next to Lohrei, and he seems to think the game differently, like almost know he has to really step it up, and he does. And then when he's with Grzelcyk, there's something to it. I think there really is something to that take that he plays better with Lohrei just because he knows he has to, and he knows he has to be the man on that pair and isn't super comfortable.
And Scott interviewed Matt Grzelcyk. Sorry, Scott, but Scott interviewed Matt Grzelcyk recently, and Matt said that playing with McAvoy feels like it limits his game. That's the other side of it too, because he feels like because Charlie's the guy that goes, he has to be more stable in the back end. And I just don't think it's a great pair for either one of them. Analytics could say they're fine, but I think both players, I think they both reach higher ceilings without each other.
If I was Grzelcyk, I wouldn't be saying that. There's no other pair that he ends up on, really. Like that's fair.
And I don't think he was really saying that. I think he was just talking about, the way his game shifts. But
he was saying
I do think overall, for the most part, they've been better together. Like at least in the regular season, obviously the numbers are really, really hard to ignore on that one. But in this case, though, it's like, listen, Grzelcyk's had a down year, and that pairing together has not been as dominant as it has been in the past. So there shouldn't be it shouldn't just be the default to go back to it every time Grzelcyk's in the lineup. And, we talk about Grzelcyk Wotherspoon wasn't working or whatever. And it's like, you barely gave them a shot. And by the way, the numbers when they were together weren't bad. Like the Bruins weren't getting pinned in, giving up a ton of chances. I mean, it looks awkward because they haven't played much together, but again, you knew that going in. And by the way, Lohrei and Wotherspoon also haven't played together. So, what was the plan there? If it wasn't to keep Grzelcyk and Wotherspoon together and give them time to, figure it out, then, why even try it at all? Again, just why did that change have to happen? Whatever you want to say about Shattenkirk's play, at least him and Wotherspoon have played together a lot. They know each other's games. So, I don't know. But
Yeah.
One thing I just want to get in, since we brought up Carlo, and I don't think we'll probably circle back to it, but he took a shot to the side of the head late in the third period and did not play in overtime. So that is something to monitor. Now it looked to me like it didn't look like a dazed concussion situation. It looked like it got either like his cheek or his ear. He was kind of like holding that. So I guess that's probably better than, possible concussion, obviously given his history, but something to monitor.
Was he on the bench in overtime?
I didn't notice because I didn't even realize like that had happened until after the game, until I went back and watched it.
And then it was so quick. What was it, 2 minutes into the overtime session?
Yeah, I was gonna say it was very it was a short overtime. So it maybe he would have settled in and got out there at some point, but obviously that he's a huge player.
And I should clarify, Scott's right. When he talked to Grizzly didn't say I play better without McAvoy, but what Grizzly does best is transport the puck and transition the puck. And he said when he plays with McAvoy, he sits back more. So that's his strength. He doesn't play to his strength, I guess it's fair to say, when he plays with McAvoy, regardless of what their numbers say. And
he used to play a lot with Carlo, but they don't want to go to that pair. They like Lindholm Carlo, so.
But I also think that's a recent development in the he sits back with McAvoy, because that's not how they used to play. They used to both go. It used to be kind of whichever one had the path went, they would both get up in the offensive zone. The whole he sits back more, that feels like a very recent, maybe it was a coaching change, maybe that's more Montgomery. I don't know, but that's not how it was during their best years.
No, and that's a good point to bring up, that wasn't always the case. It's the case now, and I always liked the Grizzly McAvoy pairing until this year, really. And so my take is more so based on what I've watched lately. But in any event, again, the lineup changes shouldn't have been as big. We shouldn't be talking about the fact that you subbed in Shattenkirk, Grizzly for Shattenkirk, or Brazo for Beecher, because it messes with the juju. But if the top players, showed up at all, or anybody on the team, it really shouldn't have been a huge thing. Anyway, I guess
I want to get to goaltending.
Yeah,
if that's where you were going, because obviously we kind of knew the last two games, okay, Swayman game 4, and then it felt like, okay, he's killing it. Swayman game 5, he gets his first loss against the Leafs all season, and we've said already it wasn't his fault. He plays 3 games in a row though, and he hadn't done that since January. I don't know, did he ever play 4 games in a row? Was that did that also?
I think he did.
I think he did, because Allmark was hurt at that point, but. It's been a long time, and it's not something that he did the whole season. Do we get back to the point where we're talking about bringing Allmark in? Because not that I think Swayman needs rest, but you could find yourself having a conversation about okay, do we want to start him 4 games in a row? Is he still the best option 4 games in a row? Not that his play has negated that, but is that an overcorrection too, to be an overthinking move to be okay, well, we haven't played Swayman 4 games in a row almost ever in the last 2 years. Do we do it now? It would have been an easy thing if the series ended to have this conversation again at the start of a Bruins-Panthers series, but now it feels like a weird conversation. Well, I personally think Swayman again, but there's reasons to say Allmark, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's the other negative about losing last night that I didn't bring up earlier, which is exactly what you just laid out, Bridget. Now you have to have a tough conversation, a tough decision about who you go with in game 6 with the goaltending, because if you finish the job last night, now you have some rest. Maybe you go back to Allmark for game 1, Florida, or Swayman. But regardless, against Florida, they would probably go back to the both goalies going to start in the first 2 games, and then, wash, rinse, repeat, and then see who takes the net after game 2 against Florida. But now you run the risk of okay, is Swayman playing too much now? Because to be consistent, Swayman's not the reason that the Bruins lost last night, but Allmark wasn't the reason the Bruins lost game 2. So I have to be consistent here. Now, what am I more worried about, and what what should we be more worried about? Swayman playing an amount of games in an amount of time that he's not used to, or putting in Ullmark, who has not now played in a week or so, because you did ride the hot hand. So, Bridget, I think ultimately my answer, and I'm curious to listen to Scott's, I don't want the Bruins to fall into the trap of you lost a game now, because we know how Monty thinks. Now overthink everything again, right? I would also probably go back to Swayman because he's got the feel of the series. But to your point, there's arguments to be made now to go back to Ullmark. So I would go Swayman as well, and I'm really curious on Scott's opinion here.
I think it has to be Swayman. You already killed the rotation. This is Swayman's series. He played well again in Game 5. He's played well every game he's been in. I think you have to go to him in Game 6. To me, where it would get really uncomfortable is if you lose Game 6 and Swayman struggles. He has his first bad game of the series. I guess my advice would be don't let that happen. Like just don't let it happen. Like I don't know what else to tell you guys.
It's last season in reverse.
Exactly.
Yeah. For Game 6 though, I think you have to stick with Swayman.
And you know what? Swayman has looked unshakable in Toronto. Like something about him going into like an adversary rank and just being so calm with it and staying so composed. And I feel like he hasn't lost in Toronto this year. And he was just lights out in Game 4 for sure. So
he was lights out in Game 5. The Bruins had two shots almost midway through the game, and not one of the goals that he let up on in Game 5. I don't think anybody would say
if your goalie gives up one goal in regulation, usually you're in pretty decent shape, right?
Right.
So usually you can score 2 goals. It's Swayman, by the way, one goal through regulation against for Swayman was par for the course. That's what he's been doing most of the series. He doesn't give up that many goals, and he gave you a chance to finish it in regulation. He gives up the overtime goal that wasn't his fault, and it's okay, well, you should be able to put 2 pucks in the net if he keeps everything out but one early goal that he was screened on. You should be able to support him with some offense, and usually when your goalie gives up 1 goal, you should be able to find a way to win that in regulation.
And by the way, that's another key development from this game is now the Leafs can feel good about their goaltending. That hasn't been the case all series. Ilya Samsonov stunk all series. They go to Joe Woll in Game 5, and I think the Bruins helped to make his life a little easier at times, but he was good. He made some really good saves. And now all of a sudden the Leafs are confident in their goaltending going back home. So, we talk about, the Bruins, took care of business Games 3 and 4. Well, part of the reason you took care of business up there was Samsonov wasn't very good.
The Frederick goal.
Yeah, I don't know. What if Joe Woll, all he has to do is get hot for 3 games. That's it. That's in play here.
Right. And again, it's easy for him. It's you didn't get any shots on him last night. So is it real confidence, false confidence? Is confidence just confidence? And no matter how you slice or dice it, I don't know. But it's again, guys, have you ever seen a team with 2 shots on goal, home or away, 5 minutes into the second period? Are you kidding me with that? That is so embarrassing. They should be absolutely so shameful for that performance. And look, the Adam Joneses of the Boston media world and the Michael Felgers, they love to point to the fact that outside of 2011, the Bruins as a franchise find ways to lose. They're losers, they're chokers, and all that stuff. I mean, look, you went to 3 Stanley Cup finals in the last decade plus. So you need a certain level of success to get to the 2 finals, even though you lost them. But they also found ways to lose those in absolute, loser fashion. But man, you look at the stats they put up on the screens when a team's leading a series 3-1, they win 91% of the time, whatever it is. If the Bruins lose back-to-back years and they're in the 10% of the team that loses that series while being up 3-1, even the biggest Bruins fans and the biggest, like, you can't defend that. These players are putting themselves in these situations, and they're putting themselves in these narratives because of their own performance and their own lack of effort. The contrarians in Boston, the media, the pundits in Toronto media that are going to bring up last year's collapse of the Bruins, and if they're doing it again, it's all on them now. And we'll see how it plays out, but they have nobody to blame but themselves. You can't feel bad for them for that. They control their own destiny. And again, like I said, if they worked their ass off in Game 5 and lost, it is what it is. But that was the exact opposite, and they deserve the criticism they're getting right now until they can prove us all wrong and they can close out this series.
I still feel like Toronto has more, like, because it's an elimination game, still has more pressure on them for Game 6. Like, the Bruins, I feel like they play like they did in Game 5 when their back isn't against the wall, right? It's getting closer to the wall, but ending Toronto's season is going to be difficult still. So, like, Game 6, they're at home. They went from it almost looked like giving up to having hope again. And it's there's definitely more pressure on the Bruins, but it still feels like Toronto is in a situation where there's a lot of pressure. It was kind of weird to me. I sat in on Sheldon Keefe's press conference last night as well, and he was smirking, and I'm like, man, like, a little too early to be smirking. And even though what he was saying was the Bruins were going to be really, really hard to beat in Game 6, you felt like he knew, like, his job got extended a little bit longer, and, like, it was just kind of weird. You never see Montgomery smile after a win or a loss in the playoffs. Like, usually it's serious. It's not a lot of smiling to be had, but he kind of had this, like, little smirk to him, and I was like, I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. But he did say, like, this is going to be Game 6 going to be even harder than Game 5. I think he's right about that. Bruins have to put up a better effort in Game 6.
Well, if they don't, sorry, Scott.
Sorry, go ahead. It's like it's a pressure off. Like, now they both have a ton of pressure on them. Like, or if you want it to spin to the negative, a choke off. Like, who's the bigger choker? Yeah. Like, it's
right.
Because, by the way, like, if the Leafs lose this in 6, they're probably still making dramatic changes this summer, and Sheldon Keefe is probably still out of a job. But now you have to talk about the flip side of that too, which is, like, if the Bruins blow it, there's going to be dramatic changes here. And, like, I'm not, like, I would never call for anyone's job, but, like, just being realistic about it, if they blow a 3-1 series lead for the second year in a row, like, Jim Montgomery's probably out. I mean, I don't think many coaches would survive that.
Yeah, I mean, Bridget, you make the comment about how the pressure is still more on Toronto's side in Game 6 because their season's on the line, and analytically that's true. But if the Bruins feel that way, then damn them, because they haven't learned their lesson.
No, they need to act like this is Game 7. Like, this needs to be back against the wall. Like, put yourself in that desperation mode. You need to find a way to match what Toronto's going to bring. Like, they have to be in desperation mode. So does Boston, because they haven't been good at home. In this series, they've won both games on the road. Like, and I said Bruins in 6 because I knew they could win in Toronto. So, I think that they can win on the road in Game 6, but going to Game 7 feels like you're just the same thing as last year. It's just gonna feel so nerve-wracking. Game 5, the atmosphere was great. A Game 7, I feel like could feel like last year's Game 7, which was like you could feel the oxygen leave the building when the Bruins were trailing. Yeah. Like it was just like, it was awful atmosphere in Game 7 last year because it was just like, wow, this is really happening. And it will be the same thing this year. Like, this is happening again.
If this goes 7, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not comfortably picking the Bruins in that game. I mean, you think they were nervous in Game 5, Scott, looking nervous. I mean, I would not pick the Bruins to win that game because here's the other thing. Like, Mitch Marner responded last night in Game 5. He heard all the chatter, the questioning of his character and his work ethic. He responded. So maybe he still
doesn't forecheck for crap.
No, but for what he can do, he responded. I mean, he was he was moving last night. And now William Nylander, who I thought looked great last night too, controlling the puck and skating, he's getting more comfortable. You bring Austin Matthews back into the lineup for a couple of games if he's good to go. It's like this all could have been avoided if you take care of business. And again, like I said, losses happen. To lose with no effort is inexcusable. And I just think it's a bad look for this Bruins team.
Yeah, and like we talk about, Bruins need to play with that desperation in game 6, and they need to treat it like game 7. It's like, yeah, you know when else they had to do that? They had to do that for game 5 too. Like they knew they had to do that for game 5. That was the entire message. Like the last 3 days was about, hey, it's really hard to end a team's season. You got to match their desperation. And they clearly didn't. So it's like, I can't sit here and tell you like, oh, of course they'll bring it in game 6 because they're going to learn from game 5. Like, I have no idea. I honestly have no idea what to expect. At this point, like, not trying to be super negative, but I would not be surprised if they blow this series. Like,
not me neither.
They got to show me something else. They got to show me that they can actually kill a team. And the last 2 years, they haven't shown me that.
Yeah. And Scott, you were a game 7 guy in the beginning, but then once they went up 3-1, you're like, no, it's finishing in 5. I still kept to the 6. I think they can win in Toronto.
That's what I get for ever being optimistic.
Well, your official pick is still
right.
in, Scott. It's still Bruins in 7, as was mine. But
the momentum would be totally in the wrong direction for that to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That would have made more sense if it was they're going back and forth, right? Like it's an even series the whole way and they find a way to, like the momentum would be all the way out on them if game 7 happens now.
Which is what I thought. When I thought Bruins in 7, I never thought it would be 3-1 Bruins. I thought it would be 2-2 going into game 5, and then somebody would win, and then somebody would 4-7. I mean, yeah, I am beside myself at how they didn't have effort last night. Like of all the things I didn't know the Bruins were going to win that game. It's Austin Matthews, no Austin Matthews. It's 2 good teams. Like I didn't think the Bruins were going to necessarily just win just because they have a lesson to be learned. What I 150% expected was that of all things, the effort wouldn't be the reason they lost. And I cannot believe after the embarrassment last year and how it played out that the effort wasn't there. Beside myself. Absolutely beside myself.
The title for our last podcast was like, can the Bruins avoid same mistakes as round 1 last year? And here we are having this conversation. Like Bruins could have won last night. We could be talking about a matchup with the Panthers, right? Like today could have been going completely differently if they finish it out in 5. If they somehow find a way to win in regulation or overtime, and we're not having to sit here and go, can they avoid the same mistakes last year, or are we on the same path? Because it kind of feels like we might be, but I don't want to be super pessimistic because, as I just said a few times, like I think.
But it is Toronto. It is interesting though, right? It's ironic, like even down to like how to the detail, right? You go up 3-1, and then you come back home for game 5, losing overtime.
Yep.
It's like it's very eerily similar. And Matt Grzelcyk isn't on both plays, and I'm not shitting on him for the play. I'm just like factually, it visually kind of is like very reminiscent.
Yeah,
you know.
I agree. Yeah. It's like burned into my head, that one from last year, game 5 with Allmark. But yeah.
And for all of this, and for as much as they sucked in game 5, and all this negativity that now is rightly coming down on them, they can still change the story. They can still change the narrative. If you go into Toronto and win in game 6, not that it'll totally excuse game 5, not that everyone will forget about it, but you still won a first-round series in 6 games. You now have to go to 7. Like, you can still do that.
Yeah.
But, it's going to take a lot more than what they brought in game 5. Like, it's still there for them. It should not be a fait accompli that, like, they're going to collapse.
Ooh, French.
Right? Like,
you're speaking French today?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Is that French or just, like, Latin? I don't know. Anyways.
I thought that was French. But
but yeah, it's still there for the taking. It's just it's hard to feel positive about this team. Like if I remember last year after game 5, still feeling like they were going to take care of business in 6. It was like, well, this team's still too good. All right, it took a game to figure things out with Bergeron coming back, and they're still a much better team. Like they're too good; they'll figure it out. I remember even before Game 7, I think we did a Sunday skate the morning of Game 7, if I remember correctly, and I remember we all thought like, "There's no way they actually blow this. Like they'll figure it out." But like now, they don't deserve any of that benefit of the doubt. Now, like it's completely understandable to go all the way to the pessimistic side of like, are they really going to blow this again?
Well,
so it's up to them to change that narrative.
Yeah, and so Swayman, we talked to Swayman after Game 5, and he said several times, "I'm excited." Like that was his. I'm excited for Game 6. I'm excited for Game 6. Like I know we can win. Like that's just how his personality is. But he was very hopeful. Obviously, that's the mentality you want from your team, you want from your goalie. And I think that there's a lot of trust in Swayman. And at this point, he's earned it. And you have to imagine part of what's being talked about in the locker room is, hey, this guy is working his ass off, giving his all, and like stepping up to this moment. Where's the rest of you? Like, where are the rest of you? Where are you guys contributing to this game, to this team, to this effort to win a series? Yeah. Just in that game. Like, I'm not saying the whole series has been like that, because obviously we've talked about how great Marchand played up in Toronto and whatnot, but like specifically in Game 5. Yeah. And heading into Game 6, like, hey, who's stepping up? Because Swayman is, who else?
Yeah. And guys, and we got to go here soon, but another reason it can't go 7 is home ice has been a problem for this Bruins team. And Scott, I appreciate you earlier keeping it to this current group being 2-5 in the last couple of years at home, because that's more relevant. But again, if people are going to shit on the Maple Leafs for having like this like negative aura about them for, decades, like you got to play it with the Bruins too. Since 2011, John Lyons with WEI, he tweeted this out. I'll just condense it a little bit because he listed out all the series. Since after 2011, when the Bruins won the Cup, from 2012 on, there's been 12 playoff series where the Bruins have lost 2 or more games at home in that series, and about almost half of them are 3, like 3 or 4. So if you look at the numbers overall, the Bruins are they're like a game or 2 less than 500 at home since 2011 in the playoffs. It's a problem. And again, is that relevant to this year's group? The numbers from 2012, 13, 14? No, because only Brad Marchand's the same guy. But this current group, as Scott said earlier, they haven't proven that they can be a strong home team in the postseason. And they also haven't proven that they can close out a team when they have a series lead. The Bruins' record in closeout games in the last handful of years plus must be pretty putrid. I don't have it in front of me. It can't be good. So in any event, I don't know where you guys want to go from here. We got a few minutes left, but I think I'm pretty much vented out at this point. We have to see how it plays out. But man, this Bruins team, they could avoid this narrative, but they put it on themselves. It is what it is.
Still one more game to avoid it before, forcing a Game 7. Scott and I are not traveling to Toronto. Unless Scott just didn't tell me and he's going by himself and he was like, not telling her. Not. No. So no, we are not going to head up there. It is a haul, and I have a broadcast this weekend for the PWHL, and I have a bunch of interviews and stuff this week, so it just didn't make sense for us to go. And also, like, super nervous now. What the hell is going to happen if we did go? So we will not be traveling to Toronto. Sorry, Scott, you don't get to listen to me sing One Direction for 8.5 hours in the car.
He's probably
I don't think I would have driven it. I think I would have, if I could have gotten the money, probably flown, but whatever.
He didn't want to do it.
It's just too long of a drive, honestly.
It's so long, but there was talk of getting like a van to bring like some of the reporters, and it sounded fun at first, and then I was like, the more I thought about it, I was like, does that sound fun? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I was hoping we come in here today and talk about a potential Bruins Panthers matchup and a Maple Leafs recap. that's not the case. We're going to be covering game 6. I think it's Thursday night, right?
Yep.
Thursday night, 8:00.
Okay, so we'll see if the agenda can be pushed a couple of days, or we'll be talking about a game 7. But either way, Bridget and Scott, thanks for your time. I think we're good to wrap this up.
Mhm.
So thank you all for listening. Take a couple deep breaths. The series is still in the Bruins' favor, though. They got to play with the desperation. We'll see if they can pull it out. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you on Friday morning. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.